Hi everyone, it's Evelyn, and we're going to discuss my top 10 filler flowers. Now what's surprising to me is because I have such a tiny urban flower farm is the fact that I actually have 10 favorite filler flowers, and not only 10, but 11. And the 11th one needs to make my top 10 list, and I'll explain why at the end of the video. Now I'm going to go through the top 10 filler flowers starting with the beginning of the season in spring and finishing off in the fall. So the very first one on my list of top 10, plus one bonus, is anemones, which is kind of funny because a year ago I was actually saying I wasn't going to grow anemones anymore at all. And in fact, I hadn't even bothered digging them up the previous fall. But they came up on their own, so I didn't plant them. They came up on their own, and I used them differently last year. And I discovered that I actually really do like them. And the only fault I had with them was that I simply didn't have enough to do with them what I wanted to do with them. So this year I have brought in a lot more corms. I ordered a lot more from my wholesaler. I have, I think, about 250. And they start, as a filler flower, start blooming for me, unfortunately, right after Mother's Day, or have been. I keep trying to get them to start blooming earlier, maybe this year, maybe not. But because our June climate tends to get a little bit colder again, like we're quite warm in May, but we get a little bit colder in June and then really start heating up in July. And for that reason, the anemones, along with ranunculus, which are a focal flower, not a filler, I get a really long blooming period out of the anemones. I was really surprised at how long they bloomed, which I didn't realize the previous year because I used them all. Last year, I didn't use them all because at first I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to use them. And that's when I discovered how long they actually bloomed in the garden. I was paying more attention to that. So anyway, they are my absolute first blooming spring filler flower. The second and the third filler flower bloom at the same time. And they are aliums and foxglove. Now, Aliums also make my top 10 focal flowers. However, there are different sizes in those spherical globes of aliums, from up to 10 inches, I believe, although I think I'm growing for my focal flower 7-inch one, down to much smaller in size. And the ones I grow for fillers are 4-inch diameter spheres. Look very, very similar to the larger ones, just smaller. And they make the filler flower. They also come in white, not just purple. So the combination of those white ones, the purple ones I prefer, but I do have some white ones growing, but the combination of the two of them together actually makes a really, really cool pairing. But they also look really nice with the foxgloves. The only issue I have with foxgloves is my flower wagon's up on the road, and it can get warm up there. And the tops of the spike of the foxglove sometimes will wilt in the heat. You can snip that top section off that's wilting and then have a straight spike. Now my foxgloves grow really tall, so cutting off part of the spike means nothing because there's still so much spike to it. So those two are my second and third filler flower. My fourth one, which I've forgotten off the top of my head, so I'm just going to look at my, oh yeah, how did I forget that? It's also an allium, and it's called hair allium. And it is the funkiest, weirdest looking flower that I have ever seen in photos, because I haven't actually seen it in real life. I bought it because I fell in love with it in the catalog for my wholesaler, which is Van Noort. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to having that weird and wonderful alium as a little filler novelty in bouquets or flower arrangements that I'm going to use. Next up on my list is sweet peas. Sweet peas are awesome as a filler. I started off with them with a little bit of a road bump because when I first grew them, I wasn't selling them properly and I barely sold any. But I realized that the way I was selling them was wrong. So now I sell them in either little tiny vases, either on their own, or little tiny flower arrangements, which they just pair so beautifully with everything else that's in them. And everybody, of course, loves their scent. Everybody loves sweet peas. But the other thing is the sweet peas, for me, will bloom straight through till September. And I can use them if I cut longer sections of them in bouquets as well. And they just add so much light airiness and a little bit of beautiful scent to them. Now, I don't often put them in my $20 roadside flower wagon bouquets. Mostly I use them for custom bouquets, for higher end bouquets. And then I definitely, because they take, if you're cutting those longer stems, they're finicky and fiddly and you can't really stick them all together because they're hard to pull apart. But if you're doing a higher end bouquet, you can afford to spend a little bit more time cutting them and leaving them out individually, laying out before you add them into the bouquet. And I quite often won't cut them until I got the bouquet made. And then I'll go cut a few. It's just not that many feet away from my bouquet making station. And tuck them in afterwards at the end. And they're just fantastic. I would not ever give up on sweet peas. They are one of my favorite filler flowers that there is, just because of what they add with their scent, with their airiness, and with their colors. So next on my list is Bachelor buttons. Now, when I started growing Bachelor buttons, again, I didn't like them. I tried the 3 classic series. One's called I don't remember what they're called. One's called Romantic. The Romantic one goes from white through pink to a very deep dark purple. And I quite liked the dark purple, but they were few and far in between, and they weren't in the other 2 series. But I did source last year, you could buy single packets of the dark purple through Johnny's, and they were called Black Button Bachelor buttons. And I love the Black Button Bachelor buttons. The Black Button Bachelor buttons, much like the sweet peas, look really pretty in small flower or vase arrangements, but they also look really good in larger bouquets. For the same reason, you can have them sitting up high. But the difference is the sweet peas add a bit of feminine touch to the bouquet. Those Black Button Bachelor buttons add a touch of masculinity to the bouquet. And I think that's great, because actually a huge percentage of the people who buy from my roadside flower wagon are men. So they will respond a bit to that slight masculine touch. Although I will say they do like the sweet peas as well. Next up on my list is astilbe. Astilbe, what a fantastic flower. I grow it in 3 colors. I grow it in the pink or lavender. I don't know what you call it, pink or lavender. I grow it in the red and I grow it in the white. And it just is a completely carefree perennial in my garden. It loves its environment. It does its own thing. I can just 100% ignore it, except for when I cut it. Now, the interesting thing about that is I grow the 3 colors, but they don't bloom at the same time. They actually bloom consecutively. So the first one to bloom is the pink. And just as the pink is finished blooming, the red starts blooming. The pink blooms for about a week. The red blooms for about a week and a half. As it starts to finish and turn a little bit brownish, the white starts. And then the white blooms for approximately a week. So I get about 3.5 weeks, maybe 4 weeks of blooms out of the astilbes. But I also get more than that, because when they're dry, they are a beautiful addition to my October bouquets when I have virtually no other filler flowers blooming. Now, what they add to a vase arrangement or a bouquet is this incredible volume of froth. It's kind of like a spike, but they're so voluminous that they're not that spiky because they have so much volume in them as well. But they're so feathery and frothy, and that adds just a really, really cool touch to any arrangement or bouquet that I put them in. And because then I can change the color as those 3.5 to 4 weeks progresses, it kind of keeps it interesting. The 8th filler flower, which is now coming into mid-June for when it starts to bloom, is yarrow. Didn't actually ever think I would like yarrow as a filler flower. Turns out I do. Mainly because I didn't realize how many colors it came in. So I bought a little, this one's red that I'm showing you on the screen, which is actually over this way. But I also have it in, that's vintage red. I also have it in a regular red. I have it in an orange, a gold. I have it in a pinky lavender color. There's probably some more, but those are the main ones that I have. And the other thing about it is in small vase arrangements like sweet peas, like Bachelor buttons, you can use little heads of it as an additional sort of texture, color too, but also it adds a different texture to those little arrangements, excuse me, when you're putting them in a bouquet, which is what I didn't like about them before, because I thought they got lost in my bouquets. They were just too small-headed to have any kind of substance within my larger focal flowers. But if you bunch a bunch of them together, you can make it into a bigger flower. So I don't know why that didn't dawn on me before. But once I started doing that this year, it turns out I really like them in the bouquets too. But I do tend to put a few together to create a larger mass of a flower head than if I just used a single stem. And I think that texture and that, again, froth, but a flat froth versus a tall froth adds quite a bit to bouquets. And I'm really, really enjoying yarrow. Next on my list is Borage. It's another one that I was surprised that I like in bouquets, mainly because up until I started using it in bouquets, I considered it a weed. It blooms prolifically, it self-seeds everywhere, it just pops up everywhere, but I really like it. If it pops up in my flower beds, it grows into quite big plants because, of course, that's where it's mostly fertilized from my natural composting systems. It's when it just grows up somewhere on its own in, in the crack in concrete or whatever. It doesn't have much presence because it's not getting good soil. But when it's grown in good soil, it's just those little tiny blue flowers. They're just so beautiful, whether they're used as a complement to other blues, such as in this arrangement with the mophead hydrangea, the blue of the borage. Even though it's a completely different texture and size, balances out that mophead quite nicely. But then if you put it in a bouquet and you just have some of it poking through here and there, it adds a little a blue sparkle to the bouquet. It doesn't demand any attention, it just has a little bit of sparkle. Like sunlight glinting, but instead of a white glint, it's a blue glint. And then, of course, one of my favorite ways of using it, and which is easier because you can use shorter stems of it then, is collaring around the bottom of a bouquet. And that delicate ring of blue flowers around the base of a bouquet, well, that's just stunning. The 10th filler flower on my list should come as no surprise to anyone who follows my channel. So I'm going to give you a sec to write down what you think it might be before I carry on. So it doesn't take long to write it down. Also, while you're down there, give me a like if you haven't already, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Well, you're going to leave a comment if you're going to tell me what you think the 10th filler flower is. Okay, I've given you enough time to write, so suspense is over. Let's carry on. It's my ball and decorative dahlias. I mean, my #1 focal flower is the dinner plate dahlias. Of course, the ball and decorative dahlias make my list of filler flowers. It's only number 10 because I'm starting from the spring and working my way through. And they start blooming around the end of June and bloom straight through, of course, till the first killing frost. So I get prolific blooms, I get a long time period of blooms. They come in beautiful colors and textures, your heart's desire, what you could want, except for, of course, blue, because there's no true blue dahlia. And when they're used, again, in little vase arrangements, they just add so much. Now, this particular picture here, that's marble ball. It's just beautiful, isn't it, with its purple and white marbling. They also look really, really stunning in bouquets, popping through the dinner plate dahlias, just as a little bit of sparkle. And in this case, I'm using the white Petra's Wedding as that little sparkle of ball in amongst all the larger flowers. Clearly, this is one of my autumn bouquets. Now, that brings us to one filler flower that I can't leave off my list, even though it's not my top 10. And that's the double click cosmos. And the reason that they have to make my list and become a bonus filler flower is because they bloom in September. And they are able to come and push forth from the top of a bouquet and add some movement, add a little bit of whimsy, add a little bit of color. And I can't show you it in a bouquet or in a vase arrangement because September has always a really, really busy month for me. And it turns out I've been kind of not staying on the ball as far as taking pictures. I have no pictures of bouquets for September for the last few years. I've made a mental note to fix that for this year. But yeah, the double click cosmos come in when almost everything else as far as a filler flower is finished. I don't even have, I was going to say sunflowers, but I do have, well, not for the second half of September because they've pretty much petered out. I'm going to try and fix that this year. I'm going to try and do seeds later, but I haven't. Every year I start a little earlier and a little later with my sunflowers. And last year I sort of finished mid-September. So I still really only had double click cosmos to add in with the dahlias towards the end of September. So hopefully that will fix. But the other thing is by that time our nights are so much cooler and the daytime temperatures have started to drop. The days are so much shorter that the sunflowers are getting tinier and tinier and tinier. So I'm really relying heavily on the double click cosmos for the month of September. It's the only month I use them. I just deadhead them prior to that and use foliage. But come September, I need and want every single blossom that I have. So that's why I have an 11th one on the list, and that is the flower that is the bonus one. Clearly, throughout this video, I have referred to my focal flowers a number of times. If you have not seen my video on what my top 10 focal flowers are, check this video out here, and I'll see you over there. Bye!